Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice, and this is episode number 20. Can you believe it? Thank you for your support, for watching and subscribing to YouTube, liking us on Facebook, listening to us as well on your iPad or listening to us Google Play. We appreciate it. We get ready for the Belmont Stakes, the third jewel in the Triple Crown, coming up this Saturday at Belmont Park. And our guest today will be John Velazquez, one of the great jockeys riding right now, the Hall of Famer. He'll talk about his mount for the Belmont as well as a few other things. And then Ron Vacarro will join us a little later on. He's with NBC Sports, and when you hear all of us say something, there's a great chance that Ron has looked it over first and given his approval. He is the man in charge of editorial content, not just for Triple Crown races, but for Olympics, NFL football, so many things. So two interesting guests again today. Ben Chaffins joins me here on the couch. Thomas Kenny having the day off. Scott Hall, you good?
Yes, sir. Ready for this weekend.
Are you ready? Are you guys ready for this Belmont? Because, you know, the ratings were down a little bit for the Preakness. The attendance was down a little bit for the Preakness with no Kentucky Derby champ going in this for the first time since 96. And, of course, now, you know, there's no Triple Crown on the line. Only one horse that's made it all the way through. That will be War of Will, the only one that's gone in all three of the races. Will you still watch? And not because I'm on it.
Of course.
Definitely. Yeah. I think I'm waiting to see what the next crazy thing that's going to happen for this one is.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah, well, see, I think that is the soap opera thing.
Yeah.
Because the ratings were huge for the Derby when they were waiting, you know, like 18 million people or so were waiting to see who's going to win this race when that 22 minutes of what's going to happen, who will it be, talking to all the different parties involved. And then so much attention was given to John Velazquez being thrown from the horse Bodexpress in the Preakness. As much attention is given to War of Will, who won the race, as we heard Mark Cassey tell us a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, there's probably even an argument that could be made for the general public. More attention's given to the unexpectedness of a horse running without a rider.
Yeah, that's true, because really the Belmont as it is now, without a Triple Crown on the line, the attendance will be down at the park, the ratings will be down on NBC. That's just normal because there's no Triple Crown chance. And horse racing becomes a sport that is really about the industry. People inside the sport know how it's important to the industry, these Triple Crown races. The general public likes the Triple Crown races. They won't keep up with much until maybe the Breeders' Cup again, unless you really follow horse racing. And if you watch this show or listen to this show, you probably really follow horse racing. But we do have people that send us things that are casual fans of horse racing, curious about things. And that's what we try to do, is introduce you to a lot of the personalities around the sport, and maybe you'll get interested in it. Like John Velazquez, I think that was one of the great things for racing. Let me qualify this very carefully. Because he was okay, Bodexpress, the horse, was okay. But what it shows is how dangerous this sport is. And honestly, except for football, I don't know of any sport. I realize that a lot of sports you can get hurt a lot of different ways, and they can be serious. But you talk about football injuries and jockey injuries, and you could talk about spinal injuries and knee injuries and things along those lines that can be debilitating, can end a career, and sadly, and with some jockeys that have ended their life because they get trampled by a horse. So John's very much involved in the Permanently Disabled Jockeys Fund. We're going to talk about that in a few moments. But, you know, that is one of the things, I don't know how you would market it, but it is good to show just how dangerous the sport can be, as well as exciting and exhilarating, and all the pomp and pageantry that go around it is what athletes these jockeys are.
Oh, yeah, it's something that, people have always loved excitement and danger in sports. I mean, going back to what made Evel Knievel so popular back in the day was people wanted to see how would he make it, or would he get injured? Because at the time.
It's like Volenda, right? Walking across the Grand Canyon. I think now, what's he going to walk across next? The New York City or something? I think he's walking across New York City, I believe.
Wow.
He walked across Chicago, and now he's going to New York. I think that's right.
Wow.
Why do we watch?
Yep.
Like you say. Now, I'm not saying you should say watch horse racing this weekend because it's dangerous, but I do think it gives you an appreciation for these jockeys and how they can handle their horses. And like I say, nobody's better at that than Velazquez, and Johnny will join us in just a few minutes. As far as the Derby itself, Ben is curious about Master Fencer, the Japanese horse, aren't you?
I am, Kenny. I'm just so curious about it.
Because you speak Japanese.
Very badly, yes.
How would you say his chances are in Japanese? And believe me, Scott and I will not know what you're saying, so there might be a few people listening that will know, though. So,
とても悪いかもしれない.
And that means?
Probably very bad.
Okay. Okay. That's kind of what I was thinking. I remember Lonnie, and we talked about him a couple of weeks ago with Rob Hyland of NBC when he was on the show. Lonnie actually finished third a couple of years ago in the Belmont. Mm-hmm. But it's been since 1990 since a horse that was bred outside of the United States won the Belmont Stakes. Wow. And that was a horse named Go and Go, who was an Irish bred. 1990, that's how long it's been. Because you would almost think like a European horse at a mile and a half might like this, even though most of them are coming obviously from turf to dirt. But there's not many mile and a half races on the dirt anywhere. This will probably be the last time the vast majority of these horses, if not all these horses, will ever run a mile and a half. That's what I always think makes the Belmont so interesting.
Yes.
Yeah, I can see that.
I agree, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's like when you and Scott are out for your morning, your 10-mile run, and then you decide to maybe even go just 11 miles the next day. That's a little different in the time. Even though it's just a little bit more, you'd say, well, it's only another mile, and we run 10.
That's true. I mean, that only happens like maybe twice a week.
See, twice a week. See, it throws you off. Because I've had people, I'm going to ask John about this because he's great at putting that clock in his head. Mile and a quarter races, mile and an eighth mostly. Mile and a quarter, okay, you got that down. But then it doesn't seem like much to add a quarter of a mile to a race for a horse. It doesn't seem like much, but that's why they call it the test of champions.
That's right.
All right. We will test your knowledge later on with more about the Belmont when we wrap this up. But next up, we'll talk to the Hall of Fame jockey, John Velazquez, right here on The Horse Racing Show. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Glad you're with us. Delighted to have this man with us. We were talking earlier, pound for pound, you won't find a better athlete in any sport than a jockey. And here's one of the best around. The Hall of Famer John Velazquez joins us. John, thanks for being on.
Thank you for having me.
So I want to ask you, I mentioned this a minute ago, and then we will not discuss this anymore because I know you've talked it out about the Preakness. But what I pointed out, thank God you're good. Thank God Bodexpress is good. Having said all that, I think it just shows how tough you guys are and how dangerous your sport can be because I've had so many people say, my goodness, he looked like he was 8 feet in the air when he came down.
Yeah, it was. I mean, one of those things that, they were so high up, from the gate, and I'm glad that, nothing seriously happened to both of us. I mean, he obviously fell the other horses went around and he was cut after he went around a couple of times. And I was fine. I actually kind of rolled around and sat up and right away, and I know I was fine.
More people have said to me, the interview we did on NBC, not moments after that, when you're walking back to the jockey's room, they were amazed at how calm and cool you were and the fact that you were okay.
Yeah, well, it's thank God, nothing bad happened. Obviously, yeah. I mean, I couldn't, be mad at what happened. It's an accident, and we gotta move on. I mean, I was glad that I was okay. I was waiting out there in the ambulance, and I was just worried about the horse that he would come back okay. So once I knew the horse was good, and the ambulance came out and drove me back to where you guys were, and then I was fine. Also, and I see that the horse was fine. Actually, I was going to go and take my saddle off the horse, and Mother Valley was there. So then I got it. So, and that was fine. Just go back to the normal routine, I guess.
And that's a normal life for a jockey. I guess you guys can never allow yourself to think, that there's some danger out there. Do you ever even think about that?
The danger's always there, even right before you get into the horse, even when you touch the horse for the first time, the horse can do something, you get kicked or whatever. I got kicked early in my career. I just trying to get on the horse right on the paddock, and I broke my hip. So it's always something there. So, but you can't think about it. You got a job to do. Concentrate on the things you have to do, and that's it. So it's just you have to be watch out for things, the horses, any surprises. Let's put it that way. Hopefully you don't get surprised, and like I said earlier, that I got my I got kicked in and broke my hip early in my career. But you learn from those mistakes and you move on.
I think you could probably put jockeys, football players, and maybe some hockey players together, and everybody could compare broken bones.
Absolutely. I mean, I guarantee you, we'll be talking a lot about broken bones and soft tissue injuries and everything else that goes through it. So it's obviously football and hockey is a very tough sport. There's a lot of contact on it, and basically we're the same thing.
Well, I want to ask you now about coming up in the if for those listening on Wednesday, June the 5th, if you're in the neighborhood of Long Island, New York, if you're in the city, come on out to Long Island at the Cherry Valley Country Club in Garden City. We're having a fundraiser that's going to benefit the Permanently Disabled Jockeys Fund and also the Belmont Child Care Unit, and that is for the kids of the backstretch workers. And John Velazquez has been a big part of that. Randy Moss, Donna Brothers from NBC will join me and Mike Watchmaker from Daily Racing Form, and we'll have some fun, try to handicap a little bit, interview some trainers, interview John. And I know you've been very much involved with the Jockeys Guild and with this Permanently Disabled Jockeys Fund, John. And what does it mean to have a fundraising event like this in terms of the money that's brought in and needed?
Well, it's very needed, obviously, and then we're constantly trying to raise some funds for the guys and girls who get hurt in the racetrack and cannot help, their families on their stuff. And let me just start with is no guarantee funding for these guys got hurt on the racetrack. So this is how we raise money. This is how we try to help the families and whatever they need these guys and girls have. So it's very important for us to continue the awareness, continue the raising funds, and these events. This is how we, get the fans involved and get the jockeys and trainers and everybody get together and have a little bit of fun. But also important to raise some funds as well.
You hit on the point right there. We've talked about many times on this show. Unlike other professional athletes, if you're not riding anymore the rest of this month, John Velazquez isn't making a dime.
That's it. I don't make a dime again.
I mean, that's something to think about, isn't it? You guys have to always be on weight. You have to always be prepared. And I guess that just goes in with the lifestyle, doesn't it? You got to eat right. You got to train right. You got to be ready every time out.
You have to be ready for everything. That's for sure. And that's our lifestyle, and that's what we do. But yeah, we're still, and to this day, we still have no guarantee funding for those guys and girls who get hurt on the racetrack, though.
Do you think there'll be a day when somehow, some way, I don't know, tracks could get involved with the Jockeys Guild, with a corporation or something, to have some kind of fund set up for, because not every jockey's a John Velazquez or Javier Castellano or the Ortiz brothers or any of the stars out there today. A lot of these men and women are almost kind of like week to week. They're not the stars.
Absolutely. We keep pushing for it. We keep working with the industry and hopefully all the stakeholders one day, will come up with something that will guarantee funding for a fund like that, though. I mean, every year we try to do something different and to keep the awareness and try to come with better ideas so at least we get them direct funding for disabled riders, and little by little we do have, but it's not enough to cover the expenses for every month and every disabled rider. So I hope that in the near future we can get some guaranteed funding that will cover most of the costs that we help those guys and girls out. And by the way, they only get $1,000 a month, which is nothing. This is 2019. But they're very grateful for everything that we do, every dime that we can give them, and whether it's medications or fixing the cars, ramps on the houses, and whatever it is that they need. So they're very grateful, though. But like I said, it's important to us. It's important to keep that awareness, and it's important to keep out there that yes, there's no guarantee funding for these guys, and this is important venues that we will put together to raise funds for them.
Well, that's wonderful. You do. I mean, I don't even have I'm so minuscule in my part. I just sit up there and let Randy and Donna and Watchmaker talk and interview you guys, and I'm always just fascinated at how involved you are. And I compliment you on that, John. You really are one of the great guys out there. Now, I want to ask you, because you know a little bit about this Belmont Stakes, and you know a lot about this Belmont racetrack. And I noticed you're going to be riding Intrepid Heart for Todd Pletcher this Saturday.
Yes.
Was there a choice between, because he's got two in there, was it a choice between Spinoff and Intrepid Heart for you?
Yeah, I did. And I chose to stay with him, though. I think he's definitely ready to go the distance, and I think they're pretty close match. I mean, they're very talented horses. I just think that I've been riding Intrepid Heart the whole time, and I think he has very, very talented, and I think that the distance will help him better. Obviously they both work really, really well last week. So just hope that they're ready for the race, though, and hopefully they can handle the distance. I think my Intrepid Heart should handle the distance according to his breeding anyway. They have to show up in the day of the race.
And you have a great relationship with Todd Pletcher. What has this professional and personal relationship been like with Pletcher? Because it's almost automatically, especially you go to Saratoga for so many meets, it was Pletcher Velazquez. You could just bet on you guys all day and do pretty well.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's been a great team effort and a great partnership, I have to say, for this many years. And I mean, like I said, so grateful and very blessed that I have the opportunities to work with Todd, and it's a great partnership. It's a trust, and one another we can communicate very well on things that happens in the races. He's very good watching the races and things that happen on the races that can read. Even before I come back and try to say something, he's watched the race, but he understands what happens in the races. It's important for having that trust and that communication with one another. And if we have to change something for the following race, whether we win or not, it's always the input back and forth to what can we do better, and it's always been there. So that's what helps and makes my job a lot easier.
I would guess when you're staying with a trainer like you have with Pletcher for so many years, and especially when you're staying on the same horse, sometimes that information in a losing race afterwards might be just as important as anything he's going to say in the paddock before the next race with you and that horse.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I mean, like I said before, we communicate really well, and I think we study the races pretty closely, and I think we can throw ideas back and forth and how the race should shape up and stuff like that. So that's another thing that's a big plus for us, that we can read the races and see how we plan to whether the race it should be in full. So it helps a lot. It makes my job a lot easier, and then when I had to put input on it, and he can agree with me, and if he doesn't disagree, we can put it together and then try to what's best for the horse. That's the most important thing. And for that particular race, that particular horse, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work. So when it doesn't work, we just move on and try to do better the next time. Like I said before, it's about having the communication and hopefully it's making the less mistakes possible. And that's how it has worked for this long.
Hall of Fame jockey John Velazquez, over 6,000 wins, a pair of Kentucky Derbies, 4 Triple Crown races overall, 15 Breeders' Cup races. Not all of those with Todd Pletcher. We saw this year on the Derby, where a great team of Bob Baffert, Mike Smith. Smith opted off for the Derby, came back in the Baffert connection for the Preakness. Is it tough sometimes when you have to tell Todd, look, I'm going this way, I'm not going to be riding your horse this time around?
Absolutely, and especially when we're together for so many years. So, but that's part of the business, when you commit to somewhere else, and you have another good horse outside the barn. Sometimes you have to do those decisions as well. For the most part, we stick around with him no matter what. Though. Obviously that's why we're still doing business with him. But when you're committed to a horse that is showing so much talent and is running really well. So sometimes you got to do that part of the business.
The great jockeys, they talk about the clock in their head. They can figure out about how the pace is going, about where they are in the race. John's one of the best at that. But I want to ask you, I don't know how many 1.5 mile dirt races you're going to ride before Saturday in the Belmont this year. So, I mean, it just kind of pops up on you, it seems like, with all the jockeys. What, you may have one race at 1.5 miles on the dirt prior to the Belmont?
That's about it. Yeah, that's about it. So probably have one race, a mile and a half in the dirt before the Belmont Stakes. So, it's like everything. You gotta get adjust to it, really. And for us, for the jockeys, I mean, you got to do the homework and everything now is that is going in hands to ride the race and to read the race. So really, you got to get accustomed right away, and whether you ride the race one time or not, you're going a mile and a half, so it's a completely different race, and it's more patience, and then hopefully the horse can handle the distance. Really,
is the toughest thing. You mentioned patience, and I guess especially with jockeys that haven't ridden that much and don't have your experience. A few of them had told me in the past that, after they go like about a mile and an eighth, they're thinking, that's a mile and an eighth. How much longer is this?
yeah, it gets very long. Trust me. Especially here in Belmont, because here's what happened. Belmont is so big, and by the time you get to the backstretch, you really are just getting to the mile pole, and every racetrack in America is sort of, when you get to the backstretch, it's a 3/4 pole,
Right.
So it's totally different, So you get to the backstretch, you think you're in the 3/4 pole, and then obviously you're not. You're still in the mile pole, just about, the mile pole, passing the mile pole when you get to the backstretch. So you got a long way to go. It's when you get used to that and right in another racetrack, that you get to the backstretch, it's only 3/4 of a mile left, to go. So you kind of get in a mindset that you have to start moving. And here at Belmont, you can't. You really have to be patient. Then you got to the backstretch, and you have a long way to go, and you really have to save your horse.
John, as far as the Big Sandy, which earns its name, there's a a lot of sand in that track as compared to any other track you're going to ride in. Does that kind of take a toll on a horse over the course of a mile and a half? I mean, is it just like another track as far as they're concerned, or have you noticed?
No, I won't say. I mean, I don't think the track is so much that it's just the distance. But really, it's what really gets to anybody. Any horse. I mean, you're going a mile and a half, and like I said, they're not used to it anyway. Now, none of those horses that run a mile and a half. First of all, the 3-year-olds, and none of them has run it a mile and a half before until they go to the Belmont. So it's about having the patience and see if they can handle the distance. And you got to save the best you can for the end. Or it's very simple. I mean, the track is normally they keep a good hold of it, and the track is pretty safe and very good. So it's about really the horse how to handle the distance.
Intrepid Heart, if this works out perfectly for you, where will he be on that backstretch? It's still a mile to go and getting ready to come around that big turn.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be too far back. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a whole lot of speed in the race yet. It's like unless somebody puts in there a horse that I don't know. But right now, not a whole lot of speed. I think he's going to be close to the pace. I think the other Todd Pletcher horse, he might be end up on the lead. I'm not sure. So he's going to be close to the lead. I don't see too far back. But like I said, whether it's close or farther back, you got to be patient no matter where we're going to be. And I think if he handles the distance, I think we're going to be in good shape.
You won over 6,000 races. I think it'd be impossible to say, hey, what's your favorite race? I don't know if you have a favorite race or two.
Absolutely no favorite races. I mean, they don't count. They're definitely those important races that everybody knows. I believe that the 2 Derby and the 2 Belmont, they really stick out no matter where you go in the world. They ask you right away. So, and people who knows about racing and always ask you, have you been in the Derby? Have you won it? But, those are the things that everybody asks you no matter where you go in the world. So unless they know who you are and they know that you won the Derby. But for most fans, the casual fan, they like racing, but they don't really follow this. First questions they ask, wait, are you been in the Derby? Have you won it? So those are very, very memorable races, though. So
yeah,
cool.
Yeah, Animal Kingdom in 11. I remember that one very well. And then Always Dreaming, just a couple of years ago. I figured that was also special because it's your second one, but this is the one that you and Pletcher teamed up together to win.
No, absolutely. And obviously the first time you win the Derby, it's special. And it was a horse that I picked up the day before the race.
Right.
But for great people, I mean, a great connection. Graham Anita, Motions, a good friend for a long time. So it's great had the opportunity and win it for them. With them, I should say.
Yeah.
And then obviously getting together with Todd with so much success throughout the years and not winning Derby with him, it was definitely one of those things that I was missing. And thankfully we got one out of the way together. So he had won it before without me, so that this time we did it together. So definitely very, very pleased and very blessed.
And I don't know, from a jockey standpoint, I've covered many of these derbies and been fortunate to cover the Triple Crown for several years and interview you, and you're always very gracious as you are now. But that derby scene, I still don't think there's anything like it. I mean, just the paddock scene alone, it looks like there's thousands of people. I know there's not, but you don't have any breathing room down there in the paddock, John, much less when you come out before 160,000 fans.
It is a hectic day, to tell you the truth, and for everybody. But it's exciting, though. This is what makes racing exciting, having so many people around and so many fans and celebrities and all the owners and the families, have the trainers and the families. So it's just what makes racing exciting, though. So nice to see that, and people continue supporting racing. So I'm glad to be part of it, definitely.
If people can't make it out to the Cherry Valley Country Club in Garden City on Wednesday, June the 5th, they can always get in touch with the Jockey Guild to help out the permanently disabled Jockeys Fund.
Absolutely. You can always get together or go to the website of the Jockeys Guild or the permanently disabled Jockeys Fund, which is I think it's pdjf.org. You can always go into the website and donate. Really, it'll be very, very nice, and every little bit will help to go for the cause, the right cause. By the way, I think these guys and girls who really give it all in the racetrack, and then when they're done, they can really have support the families or themselves. So this is definitely very important and very close to our heart.
I know it is to yours, and you got so involved with it early, and you're one. There's other big names, but you're one of the big names out there of the sport that got involved in this and got other people interested in this. Was there anything particular that motivated you to be so benevolent as you are with this?
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I mean, it's for me to give back. Obviously, I've been very blessed with my career, and I have my really bad accidents as well. But
right.
I've been able to come back and do the job that I love, and even though it's dangerous and everything, but it's been really good for my family, to me, myself and my family, the job that I do. But I've been very blessed that I can come back and do it. So yes, definitely that's one of it's always near my heart. And then Gary Bursa was really that's what got me really into it when he had his accident. Very young when he got his accident. Back in, I don't remember, it was 2000 and something.
Yeah.
And I went to see him in the hospital, and that really got me into it. Like, listen, I got to do my best to give back whatever I can get, and hopefully one day we can have guaranteed funding for these guys and girls who get hurt on the racetrack. So that's what really got me into it. I mean, I got my accidents, and I always been able to come back. So it's hard to see when you're very young, or even if you have a long career, it doesn't matter how long you've been working, but to see somebody that really trying to support the families, then say even starting out, I know the kid who started out and just rode for I think a year and a half, and I saw this kid growing up in Saratoga, and I'm talking about Michael Strake, and all of a sudden a year after he started riding, he's paralyzed. So it's hard to see that, though, and you love to to help the best you can, and really whatever help we can get. I mean, I know they're grateful, and they're very thankful.
Well, John, you're one of the great guys in the sport, and I always appreciate your time. And for those listening, if you cannot be at the Cherry Valley Country Club in Garden City for the fundraiser, like John said, you can go to the Permanently Disabled Jockeys Fund and check out their website, check out the Jockeys Guild website. There's many opportunities and ways for you to donate, even if it's just a few bucks. Because like you say, these guys don't have they've got the Jockeys Guild, but it's not the union that you would think of like with other professional sports, as John said, where there's guarantees down the road for people that are injured, or they're going to be getting guaranteed pension money down the road.
That is not all that. No, that is not. We don't have that. And like I say, there's no guarantee funding from anybody, though. we treat it like a independent contractor, so there's no money going for any pensions or money for any payment disabled riders. So that's not none of that is set up for us.
Well, John, listen, I really appreciate your time. Best wishes with Intrepid Heart this weekend in the Belmont Stakes. I know that'll be a busy day with you. Belmont's such a big deal always that day. And then best wishes with this fundraiser coming up on June the 5th. I will see you there.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
All right. We'll talk again soon. John Velazquez, the Hall of Famer, joining us here. Stay with us. More coming up on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Glad that you're with us today. Thank you for liking, subscribing, and watching us on YouTube and listening to us on your iPad or listening to us on Google Play and reaching out to us on Facebook. I think I've touched all social media outlets, haven't I, Scott Hall?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Now we can move on. I told you I'd love to have people on that I think are just the best at what they do, and here's one of them. Ron Vacarro is a great friend of mine. He is also the Vice President of Editorial Content for the NBC Sports Group. So basically, what most of us are saying, even the really big stars on NBC, there's a good chance that Ron has taken a look at it and said, I like this, or let's tweak this up a little bit, as well as all the research that is put together. And with that long introduction now, he'll tell me to make it more brief when I do it for real on TV. Here's Ron. Welcome in.
Hey, that was perfect. Wouldn't change a word.
Oh, thank you. and that means so much. It really does. Ron, when you're going through it, and it's amazing the research and the crew that you have researching, I think it's as good as it gets. Is there a big difference researching horse racing as compared to, say, like a football or basketball or some of these more mainstream sports?
It's a great question, Kenny. In a lot of ways, I compare it to our Olympic research efforts. And I say that because certainly there are some primary characters and figures, and, you know, it wouldn't seem to be the Triple Crown season if you weren't on Bob Baffert Patrol, to name one of, you know, the guy with the white hair that everyone kind of recognizes and knows. But Baffert is actually the exception. The sport is filled with stories of people who are relatively obscure, and some of them really are obscure. You know, the dreams of people making their first Triple Crown race. Every time we're looking at connections and who are these people? I don't remember this name. And, you know, if someone is an owner or a trainer making their first appearance in one of the Triple Crown races, that's like a wow moment. And it's a spark right there that I want to find out about these people and find out how much it's going to mean to them.
Right.
Because, as you know, that's one of the things, the joy of the sport, that, you know, for Olympians, it sounds cliche, but there's a lot of people, the vast majority of Olympic athletes are thrilled to be an Olympian. They're not going to win a medal. And I think you see that same joy, you know, when the 20 horses and the connections are doing the walkover at the Derby. All 20 of them have just a joy that they are doing that walkover. And I think the research side of it, you know, you really want to dig in and find out what the stories are about these people. And on the NFL, we try to do that as well, but everybody's covering the NFL. There's not that much new ground to break on many NFL players. You're trying your hardest to do it, but a lot of times you're trying to make sure you're documenting everything that's already out there in a synthesized, compelling way. And it's rare that you're finding someone that you don't know anything about, because everybody is trying to tell you about them. And in horse racing, it's really, you're starting a lot of times from scratch. And I remember you were there when we went during the week of the Preakness, and the whole massive NBC group descended on Kelly Rubley to try and find out what her story was. And, you know, that's kind of the fun of it, is learning and discovery and curiosity.
Oh, and I think, you know, to me, that's what drew me in. I mean, you know this. I think people that know me know this. I didn't grow up in the horse racing world. When I came to Lexington and was doing local TV, that's how I got involved, because it's so much a part of the city, and the whole fabric of the community is about not just horse racing, but the breeding business, et cetera. And what drew me in was the different stories around one thing. You know, it's kind of like on a football team, you can have 11 stories or more out there. With a horse, you can have 4, 5, 6 stories in addition to the horse itself, with the owners, trainers, breeders, and maybe some veterinarian that got involved and helped save him when he was a colt or a filly. That's what always drew me into horse racing.
Yeah, and I was thinking about this. It's all of that, and then add to it the fact that the actual time of the event itself that is on the day we're covering is so small, and it's like a cauldron of emotions. And we're coming up on Belmont, and the first Belmont I went to in an NBC capacity was in 2013. So that's 6 of them so far. And I look at the last 5, and in those last 5, going back to 2014, you had California Chrome. Yeah. American Pharaoh and Justify are Triple Crown winners, but dare I say that California Chrome would have been the most popular of the 3 if he had won the Triple Crown.
Yeah, everybody, because the guy sitting in Peoria, the guy sitting in Biloxi, they would have all related to this guy. As Ron knows, and people close to me know, horse racing was not like a calling. I didn't grow up around the sport. It was football, baseball, basketball, boxing. That's what I grew up around, and still follow a lot today, and have had the pleasure of covering a lot of other different sports. But with horse racing, what drew me in when I was doing local TV in Lexington is going out to the farm or going to the track and then learning that there's all kinds of stories centered around one animal. In many cases, that'll be the jockey, trainer, owner, breeder, maybe the veterinarian that helped save a horse somewhere along the line. All these things, much like a football team, you can break it down to 11 or 22 different stories or whatever within one team. And that's kind of the appeal, which I guess is also kind of the tough part to keep up with all the horses and all the connections, Ron.
It is. And it's the tough part, but it's also the most rewarding part. And it's what makes horse racing really a thrilling challenge to cover. The first Belmont I worked for NBC was back in 2013. So that's 6 of them now. You go back 5 years, California Chrome, 2014. We've had 2 Triple Crown winners. Think about that, American Pharaoh and Justify. But Kenny, if California Chrome had been able to win the Triple Crown, I'd tell you he'd probably be more popular than both of them, just because people got behind the story, whether it was the Coburn-Martin family relationship, coming together to name this horse, and $10,000, and it was just really a true American story. And then the heartbreak in the Belmont, and you were right there when Coburn was telling you that you'll never see a Triple Crown in his lifetime. Well, boy, he was proven wrong the next year, and then again 3 years later. And I say that because the emotions, it's like a cauldron at these races. They last for 2 minutes, and a football game, you got 3 hours to let the emotions ebb and flow. Horse racing, it's all this buildup, and then there's a 2-minute event, and then you're going to have one group of connections that are absolutely elated beyond their wildest dreams, even if they've been there before, because it's a new horse trying to do it. And if you've got a lot of more people who are dejected or angry, or sometimes might claim foul, sometimes legitimately so, sometimes not. And it's just all these things are happening at the exact moment. And it's just, there's such a rush of characters to cover in those moments that it's intense. And when it goes well, it's thrilling. And then you go into something like the Preakness, and I think you had a horse collar on John Velazquez. You were not going to let him get away. He fell out. He couldn't stay on Bodexpress, but he was not going to get away from Kenny Rice.
I didn't want you everybody yelling at me, "Hey, you lost him." But I thought we had John on earlier, by the way. And I told him then, I thought, thank God he's good. Thank God Bodexpress is good. With everybody being good, I think in some ways it was good for the sport, Ron, in that it shows what we know, how tough these jockeys are. Because I don't want to start saying, hey, watch horse racing because it's dangerous. But let's face it, the danger in that is, I think, compared to football, with some of the injuries and how severe they can be. And that's why I've always admired jockeys.
I think we've seen in the 2 Triple Crown races so far this year how truly talented and courageous the jockeys are that are involved in this sport. I do think it underscores the need as an industry to make sure that everybody who's in proximity of a horse is doing their absolute best for safety. We've seen the other side of it this year too, just as a general point. And the vast majority of them are great. And I think these moments show just how talented they are. And I think it underscores how important it is to make sure everybody who's around a horse does the same thing.
Talking with Ron Vacarro, who is the Vice President of Editorial Content for NBC Sports, and he is known and loved in our community of the Triple Crown announcing team, the consolidator. That way we don't go on and just ramble. We have a concise message to get out. I hope I did that more. I'll do that more concisely this weekend, Ron.
No, you're getting there, Kenny.
I'm working toward it.
It's something that you don't want to peak too early. It's something. The Belmont's the 1.5 mile test of the champion. You want to make sure you've got it for the stretch run.
But I always love I love the collaborative process with people that are really good, and that really is one of my favorite things about NBC. And that goes back when we did boxing. We did 3 or 4 years of boxing together, and that's. Just the different sports, you come in, you have ideas, and you get together and, okay, let's trim this, let's add this. It makes it fun. It's the challenge that you want as an announcer, just like a challenge that the athletes want to go out there and compete.
Well, and what we try and do is really, we used to have this thing when I used to be an Olympics researcher 10 years ago, more than that now. And we had this document that we called Relatable Awe. And it was trying to talk about all the different Olympic sports with comparisons in a way that would make someone who didn't really know about that sport but was watching it at this moment get what the participants were going through. So it might be, the height of the half pipe is actually X stories high off the ground, and snowboarding doesn't look that way. And,
right.
It's one of the things as you and I have talked about, I really enjoy covering NASCAR as well, and I'll use that quickly comparison. But Daytona 500 pole qualifying, the drivers will get out there, and the drivers often get out and get interviewed and say, I didn't do anything. I just held on. The crew chief and the engine builder deserve credit for the pole. And it's like, well, that's the inside the sport answer.
Right.
But you just drove 200 miles an hour on a 2.5 mile track with hard walls on the outside.
Yeah. No
one else can do that. So the inside sport stuff minimizes things that our audiences are in awe of. You're not doing this horse racing show for the barns. You're doing this because the American people are enchanted and curious and in awe of and want to know more about parts of this sport. And that's the approach we try and take to any of the sports we cover.
I'm taking this clip out and we're going to play this for promo, okay? Because that's exactly what I've been trying to do with this, is I've always told, and I tell the people in horse racing, I see them a lot in Lexington, the movers and shakers, you got to get the personalities involved, because if it's a great horse like a Justify last year, you got one season with him. You got 6 races as it turned out with him. And you've always got these other people that are involved, and you need to you can't just show up at the track and bet. If you don't know anything about it, you can't show up and just bet, because you may lose and you'll get depressed. But if you say, hey, I like John Velazquez, that's a guy that got thrown off the horse. Look at him, he's tough. Or, hey, that white-haired guy, that's Baffert. Or whatever the situation, I think there's got to be a rooting interest in there for the human element of horse racing, Ron.
Absolutely. And we try and sometimes find quirky things about the horses themselves. And I remember, several years ago, you, as only you could do, showed us the superstitions of one of the barns, and you brought out a chicken's foot. And just there are characters, and whatever you can do, and we can all do, no matter what we're covering, to find that and give someone something to remember. And then we talk about consolidator and consolidating. Well, the thing is, you don't want the viewers to think that this is a classroom where they have to be frantically jotting down notes to remember what everyone's talking about. We all cover this stuff in depth, and when you get to air, it's the culmination of all the prep, and you're on information overload. At least if we've done our jobs, you are.
Right.
And the real key is taking all that information overload and using it to decide what actually matters, and even more than what matters, what will really resonate, and make sure that we're not clouding that stuff with all the other things. If the stake is really good, and it often is in horse racing, you don't want to overseason it.
Ooh, I like that. And that's so true. And I've had friends of mine that say, sometimes you use a lot of sports comparisons, even on this show with horse racing. And I said, because you get outside of Kentucky and I don't know, maybe a little bit in California sometimes, and, they'll blurb at least, maybe Maryland the week of the Preakness, I know. New York, no Triple Crown. We'll see how much coverage is up there. In other words, you can't just pick up the paper or listen to the radio and hear people talk about horse racing. Very few states in the whole country. But everybody's probably talking, well, now NBA playoffs. They're talking about the NHL playoffs. There's something relatable out there, is my opinion, that they can always tie in. And I don't think that's a good thing. To me, that's what makes it interesting in sports, is I like to know about the people, and I like comparisons.
And the more you cover this, and you know this better than I, a competitor is a competitor is a competitor,
right.
And gamesmanship is gamesmanship is gamesmanship, and that is the universal language of sports at its root, and it is absolutely compelling.
And if you're talking to an athlete, you're talking to a coach or a trainer or a jockey or a footballer or a boxer or a basketball player, and you know something about them and you throw them something out there that they can relate to, they're going to appreciate the research you've done, and they're going to give you some time. I mean, the vast majority that I've met have done that. There's always one or two going to be a little quirky, but to me, I guess you find that too, don't you? When you call up someone and say, I've read a little bit about you and I want to know more about you. They appreciate the fact that you've invested some time.
They definitely do. And one of the things also you learn is you don't want to be a know-it-all. You want to show them you've done your work, because that'll get you that credibility, that'll get the opening of the door. It lets the guard down a little bit that, this person knows their stuff. But you really want to talk to them. You're not talking to them,
Mm-hmm.
You're not trying to show them how much you know once you've shown them that, you know a baseline, what you're talking about, because you really want to get their take on it.
Right.
Because that's the unique way. And it's really, it's sometimes, and you can find yourself any number of places needing to talk to someone who all of a sudden becomes central to a story. And there really are those universal things we come back to that are common things, that you're talking to someone dejected or you're talking to someone elated. Those are some of the most basic elements of human understanding. So it's breaking through everything else and starting there, and then having the person bring it to life in their specific situation.
Talking to Ron Vacarro, who is the Vice President of Editorial Content for NBC, and you can also listen to him as the voice of Yale football, and I frequently do. And that's where we first met, at a Yale football game. Do you remember?
I do. We sure did. It was over a decade ago now.
Yeah, it was the one and only time that, Mark Cuban, who owned HDNet, still does Access TV, every now and then there'd be like these one-off deals. I don't even know how we got them. And he called me up and said, hey, how about doing the game? I said, Harvard, Yale? He said, oh, you know it. I said, everybody knows the game. I mean, yeah. I mean, I'm not smart enough to go to an Ivy League school, but I know about the game. And so, yeah, that was my one trip to the Yale Bowl. And I love the whole atmosphere because, like you say, it's like there's pageantry and history, and you could feel it as soon as you walked in. And you gave me help then. Who knew you'd still be giving me help, 14, 15 years later.
Well, the Yale Bowl is certainly one of those. It looks like it could be the cousin to Pimlico, doesn't it?
Well, it does a little bit. They could use some paint and maybe a few other things. But I don't know. Pimlico, I still don't know there's hope. I think there's still hope for the Yale Bowl, but it has been a while.
They've done a great job restoring Yale Bowl, and they're not looking to move it anytime soon, which is good.
What about that? Just the whole Ivy League tradition. And you start looking back and you start going back in the record books and seeing like some of the long rivalries and dating back to the 1889 or something like that a game. I mean, it's fascinating, the rich history of Ivy League football, Yale in particular.
And it's something that I've been fortunate to get to know people who played in the 50s and 60s and 70s, which were the so-called glory years of not only Yale, but probably, Ivy League football in more recent times. And the late Hall of Fame coach Carm Koza was my broadcast partner for a long time. And what strikes me still is the vast majority of people who play football in the Ivy League know the second they set foot there that they are not going to play in the NFL. Mm-hmm. And they are not on scholarship. And they're playing because they love it. And, you know, it's, I'll take this back to, you know, the sport we're talking about, horse racing. The math will tell you the vast majority of people who get into horse ownership or horse training are never going to stand up there in a trophy celebration at one of the Triple Crown events. But you know what? There's a chance. Yeah. And it is that chance that is such a hook for so many figures. It's the chance, and it's just the love of the sport. And that's, again, it comes back to there's things that unite all these different things that we do. It might be a different specific, but ultimately at the roots of it, why are the people that we cover doing what they do? Well, the vast majority of them are for the love of it, and because they're competitive, and because they want to win, or they try their best in trying to get there. And you meet some fascinating people along the way.
And you know what? That just summed it up. That brought it back together, really, because yes, everyone thinks they can win a Derby. Maybe someday they look back at a funny side for 17,000 or a California Chrome for 10, and realize there's only been one horse that ever sold for $1 million, that won the Derby, and that was actually Fusaichi Pegasus, sold for $4 million. So, you know, that does give hope out there. And there's always that one guy that goes to the NFL from the Ivy League that always gets the attention or becomes an actor. See, I'd say the Ivy League has as many good actors that played football as pretty much any other conference, Ron.
Ed Marinero was one of them.
Marinero and Dean Cain, I was thinking, did he play?
Yeah, he was a Princeton guy.
Yeah.
But Marinero was at a banquet once, and he said, I'll tell you, because one of his records, a long-standing Ivy League record, had been taken down, and he goes, whoever the heck said records are meant to be broken, I want to meet him, because that's not true. You know, all the years later, right. he was much funnier delivering it than I was. But when you mentioned actors, that was the story I thought of.
That's a great story. I remember watching a documentary. I think the greatest sport headline. It's right there with the political headline. Dewey wins at Truman's holding up and celebrating his victory. Is Harvard wins 29-29.
Yeah.
Sorry to bring that up, but yeah.
1968 Yale Harvard game, and it was a great Yale team. They ended up sharing the Ivy League title with Harvard that year, but Yale blew a 16-second lead in the closing minutes, and just a sequence of situations that, you know, every single thing had to go right for Harvard and every single thing had to go wrong for Yale, and it all happened, 2-point conversions and whatnot. And that's, you know, so as a Yale man, I have to say, well, if Harvard thinks a tie is a win, good for them. Glad to hear it. But it's funny, you know, I mentioned Carm Koza. He was the consummate gentleman. I never heard him in all the years that I worked with him talk about anybody negatively. The one thing you could do to get on his bad side was to bring up 1968, 29-29, because, you know, he was the coach then,
yeah,
and it's all anyone wanted to talk about, and he had said his piece about it, and, you know, but again, one of those things about, you know, the person behind the person. He had some real stars on that team, Calvin Hill and Brian Dowling, right, to name two, and when it was falling apart for Yale at the end of that game, some of the offensive stars were begging Carm to put them in the game to spell some of their defensive brethren who were tired at this point.
Wow. And
Carm would not do it because he thought it would humiliate the people who had been playing defense all year and all game. And as much as he wanted to win, and he's so competitive, it was more important to him to not disrespect his people who were playing defense. And I think that's one of the reasons at the end of the day he was so beloved. And I'd point out that wasn't him being a softie, because when the long history was run, you know, he won 10 Ivy League championships as a coach, which was pretty damn good.
Yeah.
So he was able to do both.
And you telling that story is just makes this show even better, because I love to talk about other sports and bring everybody in. And I love the Harvard. Yeah, I love old rivalries. I just, whatever they are, I just think that's just wonderful. And that's what sports is about. Like you just said, the whole emotions of it all, and even some of the memories you kind of wish you could forget. But they're there, and that's what makes sports so intriguing to me, and has been fortunate to make a pretty decent living doing it.
Well, you're great at bringing those stories through, and you never know where you're going to find them. One of the things that stays with me most is I saw the Nordic Skiing World Championships in Liberec, Czech Republic in 2009, and it's a Wednesday, and I'm standing in, what you might describe as the middle of nowhere, but there's 40,000 people, because you're in the heart of Europe,
wow,
over there watching a cross-country skiing race on a Wednesday afternoon in February. And until you're assigned to do it, you'd never find yourself there. But then you start to realize, wow, this is a big deal. Yeah. And you start to realize why people care about things. And, the list goes on and on and on. And it's never boring. And sports, to me, is the greatest thing going, no matter what it is.
And I expect it to be a fun Belmont, given this wacky way it's gone on the Triple Crown Road. I think we're going to have a lot of fun Saturday. I do. I just have a feeling the unexpected is going to happen, or we're going to see something really special. It's just a gut feeling, okay? I'm not trying to predict, but the way it's gone, I think it'll be an interesting day.
Here's to that, and so let's hope that it's a safe day, an interesting day, and it is just a great day of racing.
Yeah,
at least the Belmont, but the Manhattan, the Met Mile, like there are some great races on the card.
Yeah, the Met Mile actually will probably be a better race than any of them. That's a star. Not that we don't want you to tune into the Belmont Stakes itself, because that's going to be huge. It's a Triple Crown race, and I think really we had Mark Cassidy on a couple of weeks ago, and he summed it up best. He said it's a Triple Crown race. Because I asked him, I said, any hesitation after the Preakness that you'd go to the Belmont? He said it's a Triple Crown race. I've been in horse racing all my life. My father was in it. I know the value and the meaning and the history of a Triple Crown race, and I think that sums up the Belmont.
Absolutely. And, what would we be saying about War of Will if things had gone a little differently in Kentucky? We'll never know.
Right.
May or may not have won, but, Mark Cassidy has been one of the compelling characters on this run this year. And yet, the first time he crossed my consciousness, is again a relative newcomer to horse racing, was back when he had Classic Empire, which was the morning line favorite for the Derby a few years back. And we did the feature on the Cassie family, which had the roots on that street right behind the TV compound at Churchill Downs. Right. And it's just the guy we're talking about, who you just mentioned, has been all over the place and has had ups and downs in the sport and in the family because of the sport and all those things. And you could trace it back to a house that's a stone's throw, literally, from Churchill Downs. And that's what we're talking about. That's what we're talking about in a nutshell, about how great this sport is.
Ron, I can't thank you enough for being on. I look forward to seeing and working with you again this week, my friend.
All right. Thanks, Kenny.
Thank you. Ron Vacarro, who is the Vice President Editorial Content for NBC Sports. He's as good as it gets. And glad that Ron's on. We'll be back with some final thoughts on the Belmont right after this on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back into the Horse Racing Show. Thank you for tuning in again this week. We get ready for the Belmont. Who knows what's going to happen in the Belmont? I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It has certainly been a soap opera with the disqualification at the Derby that made Country House the winner over Maximum Security. The unseating of John Velazquez in the Preakness. They got about as much attention at Bodexpress running around the track by himself as War of Will winning it. I do think it's going to be a fun, interesting Belmont, though. I just have a feeling, okay? That's just a feeling. It's not a prediction. And Ben Chaffins, you have some stuff. You have some numbers that make it kind of interesting.
Yeah, some interesting numbers. There have been 23 horses who have won the Kentucky Derby and Preakness, which makes sense going for that Triple Crown. Only 13 horses have ever won the Preakness and Belmont, with the most famous being Man of War. So if War of Will were to win the Belmont, then he'll be in that illustrious club.
Yes, and a note on here used to be a bar bet. What year did Man of War win the Kentucky Derby? He never ran in Kentucky. Although he's at the Kentucky Horse Park, they got a statue and everything up, but he never ran. He just, at that time, nobody thought about it. You know, the Triple Crown didn't exist really. You didn't think about that. It was years later. We'll talk down the road about how the Triple Crown actually got the name the Triple Crown, because when Sir Barton won it in 1919, it wasn't really the Triple Crown. Nobody knew what to call it. He just won those 3 races. But, you know, adding to what you said, here's what's really interesting is that a Fleet Alex in 05 was the last to win, was the last to lose the Derby and come back and win the Preakness and Belmont. And so War of Will will try that with Mark Casse. And then Bill Mott, wouldn't it be something if he wins this with Tacitus? Because he said it's bittersweet the Country House win, although he thinks it was deserved. I do too. The stewards made the right call. We're past that. But if he does this, he'll become only the second trainer since 96 to win the Derby and the Belmont with 2 different horses. Todd Pletcher did it in 17, not that long ago, with Always Dreaming won the Derby and Tapwrit won the Belmont. And then Wayne Lucas in 96, Grindstone won the Derby. Of course, he got injured, didn't go any farther. And Editor's Note won the Belmont. So, you know, a couple of things there that might be interesting. Or Todd Pletcher may sneak in there with some long shot. I don't know. I don't know if he'll have a long shot, but he might. I think Spinoff is a long shot, and he might get in there and make it interesting.
Maybe, but I think no matter what, it's going to be an interesting race.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about it. We'll have a little special blurb about it. We'll be talking to you from Belmont later this week right here. Ben Chaffins, thank you. Thomas Kenny will be back soon. Scott Hall, always a pleasure. Do you have a long shot? Have you figured it out?
Not yet.
Will you let me know?
I'll let you know this time, Kenny.
Because he nailed Country House in the Derby.
I know.
That's impressive. How come you're not doing this show? Okay. I'm glad. We need the work. Okay. John Velazquez, thank you for being with us. The Hall of Famer Ron Vaccaro from NBC Sports, thank you. And thank you for joining us. I'm Kenny Rice. We'll talk again soon on the Horse Racing Show.